Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, my patrons, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. So, yesterday I had nothing to say. And yet today I get a lovely response in terms of a comment to asking about core new tension and a workshop that is being offered by Alan Menendez in Australia. And you can go back to a couple of my recordings and see the comment and read for yourself. But in my mind's eye, I have Alan here, who wrote me the notes, and I hear another student of mine to accentuate the fact that I'm trying to broadcast to my students, and I don't mean to presume on someone who knows a lot already, knows way more than I do about a lot of things, okay? But he writes, "Hi Michael, thank you for your presentation of core new tension. Nice. To clarify, our approach is not too dissimilar to yours," which is fascinating, right? I want to know more. Let me just read this. I.e., in quotes, if it's out of alignment, comma, align it, end quote. So if it's using the plumb line in the frontal plane, as in the following. If the head is forward, align by anterior rotation of the skull with drawback. Shoulders, posterior rotation of the rotator cuff to counter rounded shoulders and tight pecs. The above creating a symmetry between head, shoulders, and sternum. Hips, like going through and talking about it was at the head and then shoulders, and now hips, posterior rotation of these to counter hyperlordotic lumbar spine. Okay? I don't know if that means anything to you, but I understand what he's saying. Knees, slight bend to counter hyperextension. Okay? Heels, ground the heels and feet by use of tripods. Okay? None of this is centered around imagination, but reality of the subject's requirements and then adapting them to movement. All taking into account gravity, imbalances, reactionary tensions, malalignments, torsions, etc. Accounting for these and then looking at the body as a system of levers, pulleys, weights, and fulcrums to create balance and uniformity with strength and flexibility. So I guess we're talking the same language. Thank you so much, Alan, for contributing that. And I encourage everyone, if you're in the area or you get a chance to participate remotely, to go to that workshop and learn what's there to be learned. Okay? The distinction between our approach and my approach is wonderful because I would call that points of view, right? So we're sharing points of view. And in doing that, he brings up the quote of, if ours is out of alignment, align it. All right, and so this is all headed somewhere, and I don't want to take forever to get there, but here is this device that's meant to wrap around your neck and hold a flashlight kind of thing, and I took off the holder just to have the plastic representative of the spine. Okay. Now, when Alan says using the plumb line in the frontal plane, those are fantastic words. You know, use those words as your own. Meaning, don't give, what am I saying? They're very good words. And they're words that define a very particular orientation in space. Namely what? Namely the plumb line, right? And what line is that? That's this line, right? And how is this line determined? Gravity, right? So we're on the same base there. And then using this as a point of reference, totally get that. He does me the honor of, Alan, you do me the honor of, actually addressing parts of the body, namely the head, the shoulders, and the hips, and the knees, and the ankles, the heels. He goes to heels, right? And so if the head is forward, align it by anterior rotation of the skull with drawback. Now that word drawback, memorize that too. Because drawback is about doing this. And the best phraseology I had to communicate that was pulling away from an unwanted kiss. But that's a whole phrase and a lot of words. And if you can train a person to know what they're trying to do with just the one word drawback, I think that's a great word. And then, so let's see. In going to the shoulders, he says, posterior rotation of the rotator cuff to counter rounded shoulders and tight pecs. So it's saying, okay, we do this at the head. We anteriorly rotate and draw back the head, right? And then at the shoulders, I want to make sure I say this right, posterior rotation, but doing this, right? And that's done to counter rounded shoulders and tight pecs. So it's this to do this and this to do this. And again, with hips, it's posterior rotation his terminology is posterior rotation of the hips. If you mean going this way with the hips, it doesn't make any sense that would counter hyperlordotic lumbar spine. So in order to pull yourself out of this in your lower back, right, you have to engage this way in your hips in order to how is it said? To counter hyperlordotic lumbar spine. And then knees, when it goes to knees, slight bend to counter hyperextension. And then heels, ground the heels and feet by use of tripods. All right, Now, none of this is centered around imagination, but reality of the subject's requirements and then adapting them to movement. So, Alan, if you were in the room, I'd say, huh? Meaning, the word subject, I think I would refer to as student, because in my world, I'm broadcasting about how to survive as a Pilates instructor, and I'm talking about teaching and instructing and presenting a point of view of Pilates. Why am I saying that? And within that point of view, my viewers are my students. The people that take lessons from me are my students. Now, presenters, all I'm doing is presenting, like here, broadcasting, and I present as though you are, even though you might not be a student. So, see, I don't get what you mean. None of this is centered around imagination, but reality of subjects' requirements and then adapting them to movement. I guess that goes back to the presumption that what you're looking for is, if it's out of alignment, then you align it, right? So in doing me the honor of actually talking about these different parts of the body, and then saying what you would do in order to bring something into alignment, right, is a consistent point of view. And then one that in the heels, that they ground the heels and feet by use of tripods. I think of the tripod of the exterminator in the robot manifestation. The Terminator, not the exterminator. Robot, tripod. All of this taking into account gravity, and we know gravity, right? Gravity plays a much bigger, more central role, I think, in the POV of MMP. But among the list of things then, imbalances, reactionary tensions, malalignments, torsions, etc. So really, gravity is an assumed medium, see? Gravity is a uniform medium. That's why in our bodies we're after uniform engagement. Accounting for these and looking at the body as a system of levers. Okay. So now that would be different than the MMP point of view, wouldn't it? But just interesting to know that this point of view looks at the body as a system of levers and weights and fulcrums to create balance and uniformity with strength and flexibility. Now, Alan, I think you're too kind to say, so I guess we're talking the same language. Because I think the language that we're after is uniformity, right? So I've been through the letter twice now, I think, right? And so on the third time, I want to add some more refinement to my student that isn't teaching this whole biomechanics thing. That in terms of, if it's out of alignment, align it, right? The approach and going through the different parts of the body and talking about what you would do to bring things into alignment comes from the point of view of looking to see what's wrong and then fixing that. And so by participation of addressing all the imbalances and the reactionary tensions and the malalignments, torsions, and I wonder if that's meant good or bad, see? My point, okay, on this thing. What I want to make, all right, so. Alan, I think you're imagining or you're portraying that what I'm saying is more in the imagination than in the reality of things, right? And yet, by your own example, when you talk about anterior rotation, first of all, as soon as you say rotation, you define an axis around which that rotation is happening. And then by drawback, right, you're pulling the head into a position of alignment, right? But in doing the rotation and in doing the drawing of the head back to align with the shoulders, my point is, here you talk about rotation at the hips, at the shoulders, posterior rotation, right? And then, like you mentioned, body parts, the rotator, and in order to come out of this, see? So, to me, if you actually use cues that define rotation, right? And you talk about tension and alignment and the things that you do to make correction. The thing about these plastic pieces, now sometimes it just breaks completely apart, but if I really want to line this up, I can address every individual piece and try to make it as straight as I can throughout the whole thing, or I can do what? I can put it under tension. And in putting it under tension, see, those joints all float inside of one another. Amazing, but true. And then, without having to adjust them individually, you get alignment. Once you have knowledge that you use the body to rotate this way to fix a problem, and you use the body to rotate this way to fix a problem, to what extent then do you step back away from it and see that those interactions connect to one another via the TVA? It's so enlightening, and I'm so thankful for the generosity in the response, because in MMP, the look of the body is at the dynamic that the body is seeking to achieve in the physics in which it exists. So long after, Alan, you and I are way gone, what I point to that seems imaginary will take on more realness to the extent that people can say, yeah, I can feel that. The drawback? See, the imagination is in the conceptualization of how the physics works. And in your point of view, you're talking about systems of levers and pulleys and weights and fulcrums, right? Steam shovel. as though the body doesn't create a dynamic tension within itself to engage itself. So, maybe I'll do a better job of this on Facebook. But again, Alan, thank you for writing, and to my students, read Alan's book and see the premise of, we look at what's out of alignment and we align it by doing these things that all are talking about rotation at these parts of the body, without in any of the notes here acknowledging that that the rotation implicitly points to endpoints, meaning the end of the axis around which the axis is occurring, and that those rotational dynamics connect to one another. I feel it. A lot of my students feel it. And it's up for you to find it if you wish, and to recognize that, yes, it's imagination. I've been talking about imagination and knowledge. It's one thing to have it be an imaginary image and be useful just as the image. My point is that if the image matches the reality, it's more than imagination. It's the reality of the situation. When you talk about none of this is centered around imagination, but reality of the subject's requirements. What subject? I mean, a human being? And their requirements that exist before movement? I'm confused by all of that. To the point where I lost track of where I was going. The body is, to me, I would agree, a system of levers and pulleys and weights and fulcrums. That's one way to look at it, and it's all true. But just look at the human body and its capabilities to do what you say, what you tell your instructions are about, biomechanically, to fix stuff. MMP points to the reality of the rotational dynamics and the tension that it creates between them, each other. To the extent you get the uniformity and balance, the strength and flexibility we're all after, but it's in pursuit, for MMP, it's in the pursuit of the uniformity. Contrology develops the body uniformly. And if you're serious about that, you end up with core new tension. Know what you know. This was a great example about addressing things as issues, as individual things, versus knowing how to create tension. Not only in your own cueing and what you're saying, but to the extent that you hold back the curtain, you allow a person, through their imagination, to find the sensation that you're looking for. And that's as real as it gets. For a while, anyway, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain. Add 2 and 2 after you've evaluated points of view. Direct your thinking and Geist.